everyone, my name is Hassan Abdullah. I am an ACCA member and CFA charter holder and a subject specialist of performance management exam. I've been teaching this exam for the last 7 to 8 years in UAE. This particular session is about different videos which gonna cover the syllabus areas of performance management and specifically highlighting the tips and techniques which students should focus on acing the PM exam. So stay tuned for the next videos. Let's quickly look at the breakdown of performance management syllabus areas. The syllabus has been divided into 6 areas, and the last section that we have is employability and technology skills. This is not tested in the exam. This particular syllabus area is all about giving guidance to the students how to use the Excel and word processing sheet while solving their questions in the exam. So if we exclude this particular syllabus area as it's not tested in the exam, then we are left with 5 syllabus areas. So let's quickly look at the syllabus areas one by one. The first one here we have information technologies and systems for organizational performance. This is relatively a short area where we look at how different types of informations and systems can be used by the business to take informed decisions for increasing the wealth of their shareholders. Second one, we have specialist cost and management accounting techniques. Here we're going to cover different types of costing techniques like target costing, life cycle costing, activity-based costing. And the objective of all of these techniques is just to calculate the cost of a product or service. Then we have decision-making techniques. Different types of decision-making techniques we'll study here, like pricing decisions in the scenarios of risk and uncertainty, how different types of managers, they take the decisions regarding break-even point, and how these sort of information points are helpful for the business to increase the profitability of the company. Then we have the budgeting and control. Budgeting is all about setting the targets, and once the targets are set, we're going to compare it against the actual performances, and differences are called variances. So that's the control measure to assess the performances of the different departmental managers. Lastly, we have the performance measurement and control, and this is one of the you can say a very important area of PM exam. Here we will assess the performance of the organization as a whole. This section is divided further into 2 chapters, assessing the performance of the organization as a whole and assessing the performance of its divisions. So when it comes to organization as a whole, the tools like balance scorecard, building block model, all of these tools are really helpful and important to assess their performance and project their future outlook. And when it comes to divisional performance assessment, then we have the tools like return on investment and residual income. So these are being used to evaluate the different divisions and their performances. And in the end, in this particular chapter, we also have transfer pricing, that when internal divisions, they trade with each other, then how the prices should be set and who should set the price. Should it be set by the divisions internally, or should the head office intervene and dictate the transfer price? So these are the 6 syllabus areas we discussed. 5 of these are testable in exam. Now next we have the exam pattern of the PM exam. PM exam is divided into 3 sections. Section A, B, and C. Section A consists of 15 objective test questions, each worth 2 marks. So the total is 30 here. Then in section B, we have 3 case style questions, each worth 10 marks. So the total we have here is also 30 marks. And then we have section C, which is constructed response question. 2 questions we have, each worth 20 marks. So the total marks for section C is 40, and the total exam marks are 100. Section A and Section B, what's the difference between the two? That when it comes to Section A, each question is independent from another. It will have a brief question, brief scenario given to you in one paragraph, and using that you need to find the right answer from the options, or it could be a true false question, or it could be a blank question. When it comes to Section B, the style of the questions would remain same. However, the examiner would give you one case study that might come up from one particular topic, or two closely related topics they can combine, and then they will ask you 5 questions from it. So that's the difference between Section A and B, that Section B1 case study will have 5 questions from it, whereas when it comes to Section A, each question is independent from the other one. Section C, the most important section of the PM exam, constructed response questions. Here we have 2 questions. And why it's called constructed response? Because the student has to construct a response to a given scenario. And important point here is that the response can differ from student to student. So that's element of subjectivity and creativity is with the student. So for example, examiner tests a balanced scorecard question to evaluate the performance of a company or an organization, and how the student perceive the given information, perceive the given data, and evaluate it to assess the performance of an organization. That might differ from one student to another. As far as their reasoning, their logic, that's correct, that makes sense. So marker should give marks to both of the students. So it's about how you respond to a particular scenario, and then based upon that, you get the answer, you get the marks. But again, important point here is the relatability. You need to relate your answer to the given scenario. Journal comments are not awarded in this particular section. Your answer should be as per the question scenario, and it should include that relatability element. The more you will try to relate it with the question, the more you try to answer that why say, let's suppose sales are increasing, why costs are going down, why the company is unable to sell more units, you get more marks for it. The more you write the journal comments in section C, so those unfortunately are not rewarded. So let's come back to our first section of the exam, which is section A. Here we have 15 questions as we discussed, each was 2 marks. So the next point is, out of the syllabus areas that we have, 6 syllabus areas that we have, which syllabus areas will be tested? So specifically in section A, you need to know that all of the syllabus areas are tested. So expect that it's a kind of a section where the examiner will try to test all those 5 syllabus areas, and it's not a kind of a section that would be inclined more towards one particular syllabus area. So all sections are important, and you have to specifically prepare this section with the context that all of the basic concepts that you cover during your sessions that would be tested in the exam of this particular section. I would also like to highlight a particular section that's important from section A of the exam, which is the syllabus area A. The reason being, students usually focus on rest of the 4 areas as they are core areas of performance management, and they usually ignore this section A, which deals with the information and systems and how these are being used to improve the performance of an organization. But because the examiner usually tests all syllabus areas in PM exam, so this relatively section generally cannot be tested in section B or section C of the exam. So therefore, it's highly likely that you would be having 3 to 4 questions, multiple choice questions, objective test questions coming in exam from this section. So do focus on section A of the syllabus area while preparing yourself for this part of the exam. Performance management exam deals with issues like costing, budgeting, variances, assessing the performances of the business. So it looks like that it is all about the numbers, using the numbers to assess the performance of the company using the numbers to take the decisions. But when it comes to PM exam, it's not like that. So it's a kind of an exam which is quite balanced when it comes to the proportion of numerical questions and theoretical questions. So expect that both styles of questions would be tested in the section A of the exam, and be prepared to have theoretical questions in this particular section and focus more on that. Now, next we have section A, and we will take two questions from the recent examiner's report and we will try to answer it. The objective of this video is to highlight what are the common mistakes usually students do while attempting questions relating to section A of the exam, and specifically highlighting some important tips and techniques how to solve section A questions. So we are taking questions from the Performance Management March-June 2021 Examiner Report. And we have here is example 1. Which two of the following bases for setting a transfer price are most likely to result in goal congruent behavior by both the selling and receiving divisions? Now, whenever in exam you're solving questions relating to section A and B, where we have the objective test questions, specifically try to read the requirement of the question, try to identify which particular topic or syllabus area that's been tested in exam, recall all the stuff you covered during your preparation phase relating to that topic, and then read that question again and try to identify what examiner is actually looking for. Once that part is done, come to the options. Try to have a logic reasoning of each of the option, and then the most important point is the relatability. If you think that this option is relatable to what's been required in the question, it means that's the right answer. And if you think it's odd one out, it means that that's not the correct answer. So let's read this requirement again, and we will do it in the same way to find out our right answers. First of all, this question specifically says that which two of the following, so you have to select two options out of the four, and this is about transfer price. So it's a topic we have in performance measurement. We identified it. Now the requirement of the question specifically focuses on congruent behavior, which means that the divisional managers, their interests, their objectives should be aligned with that of overall organization objectives. So in which scenarios, what type of transfer pricing techniques we achieve the goal congruency? So four options we have. First of all, opportunity cost. Now we need to know what is opportunity cost. So opportunity cost means that we are taking into account the variable cost to make the product, and if we have any sort of loss on selling the goods internally to the division, then that loss of contribution, that's opportunity cost, will also be taken into account while setting the transfer price. Second point here we have is market price, that this is the price at which the seller can sell the commodity, the good, to external customers, and it might be the same price at which the buyer can buy it from the vendor outside market. So that's the market price at which trade should take place. Then we have the actual cost. This simply means that whatever the cost that has been incurred by the selling division to produce the product or to sell the service, same cost will be charged by the selling division as a transfer price. And last one we have take the full cost and add some profit markup or margin in it. Now out of these four, which one we think that are realistic ways to set the transfer price and which will achieve the goal congruency behavior? So it is a point where both the buyers and the seller, the buying division and the selling division, they would be, both of these would be happy in selling the goods and doing the trade. So let's come to the first one, opportunity cost. Specifically, if the seller has external demand for its product, then seller won't be happy to sell the product to the buying division at a cost, at a price lower than the market price. So in that case, we can calculate the opportunity cost and we can find out what is the overall cost to the seller. That's the cost of internal trades, and at this price the trade should take place. Now this seems to be an appropriate price for the internal trade, because here the seller will not incur any loss, and from the buyer's perspective and overall organization perspective, it seems to be an appropriate price. So that is a correct option. Second one is the market price. Now it's again quite fair way to set the transfer price at market price, because this is the price at which the seller could sell the product in the market, and the buying division could also buy it from the vendor. So that again seems to be a fair price where both the divisional managers would be happy to trade. When it comes to C option, which is actual cost, then this actual cost might not be a fair price and could not lead to goal congruency, because here the seller does not have any intention to control or reduce the cost. The seller might incur a very high level of cost because they do not have any incentive to control or reduce the cost, and those inefficiencies can be passed on to the buyer in terms of the price. So first of all, those inefficiencies will not allow us to achieve our objective of goal congruency, and later from the buyer perspective, maybe that cost will be too high, or from a seller perspective that would be too low to generate any profitability. So maybe both the divisions won't be happy to accept this price. The last one, we have standard full cost plus price plus profit. So in this option, again the issue is that once the seller sets a transfer price based upon full cost plus profit, that price might be too high and might not be acceptable from the receiving division's perspective. So out of the four options that are given here, A and B seems to be more appropriate, where we think that both selling division and buying division, they both would be happy and would accept the transfer price, and it would achieve the objective of our requirement also, that is goal congruency. Now let's look at the second example. Here we have again the same process we will follow, that read the requirement, identify the topic, recall whatever you have studied with respect to that particular topic, recall all stuff, then read the statements, make a reasoning out of it, make a logic out of it, and try to relate it with the question. So this question is about true and false. So the first statement here we have is joint costs are relevant in decisions about whether to sell a joint product at the split off point or after further processing. So this question is about relevant costing, which is a topic we have, a chapter we have in decision making technique. And when you recall relevant costing, then you need to also remember the characteristics of it. So when it comes to relevant costing, we say that relevant costing is a particular kind of a costing that is for a specific decision, and one of its characteristic is that this cost is a future cost. Now when you are standing at the split off point and you are trying to assess that whether the product should be further processed or should be sold at this point, then the joint costs are incurred prior to split off point. And prior to split off point means that it's a kind of a past cost, it's a kind of a sunk cost. And we know from relevant costing principles, this is called recallability, that you have to recall what you have covered under relevant costing. So if you can recall it, that relevant cost, one of the characteristic is that it must be a future cost, it cannot be a past cost. Then easily you will say that this joint cost is a past cost, hence it's a sunk cost, and sunk cost cannot be relevant. So the right answer for this one should be false. Second statement here we have relevant costs and revenues in decisions relating to the operating of internal service departments or the use of external services are the differential costs between the two options. So you have to decide that should we operate a particular department internally or should we outsource it, how we will take that decision financially. Obviously it's a decision where there are different types of costs being incurred in each of the decision, and in order to evaluate it on financial grounds, we need to look at the differential cost. What's the extra cost that is being incurred in these options, and where the cost exceeds that particular option should not be taken into account, where we'll have cost savings, we will consider it. So it means that the differential cost is a kind of a point that should be taken into account while taking relevant costing decisions. Again, if you recall it from your relevant costing chapter, then characteristics of relevant costing includes that differential cost is a relevant cost. So from that perspective, this statement is also true. So we looked at both the examples, and you can see the objective here is that read the question carefully and try to identify what kind of topic that's been tested in exam. Then understand the question requirement, read the option. For each of the option, you need to know the understanding of it, the logic behind it, the reasoning of it, and then relatability. Try to relate it with the requirement. If it makes sense, it's a correct option. And if it doesn't make any sense, it doesn't have that relatability feature, then in that case, the option is not correct. Next, we have two more questions from section A, and this time the questions that I have selected, those questions are numerical, and as these are numerical questions, therefore we will be doing it on the constructed response workspace that's been provided by the ACCA to the students to practice the numerical questions. Now, in example number 3, a scenario is given to us, and if we look at the requirement, it says that if the company is not able to increase the availability of machine C's operational hours, what is the production ranking of product Y? So first of all, how to tackle such a question? We will be reading this question, identifying the topic that's been tested in the exam, recall all the steps, all the formulas relating to that particular topic, and then relate it with the question. So let's read it. A manufacturing company uses machine C, which is operational for 5 hours a day to manufacture 4 products, W, X, Y, and Z. Factory costs are $150,000 per day. The company uses throughput accounting, and its object is to maximize profits. So it's specifically mentioned in the last line that the company is using throughput accounting. So it means that this question is from the costing techniques where the examiner is testing the throughput accounting principles. Now, before we read the remaining data, we need to first recall the steps. We would have studied this one during our preparation phase, how to tackle throughput accounting questions. So step number 1, if you remember, that should be identifying the bottleneck process. Once that's done, then we calculate throughput contribution per unit. And here we need to be very careful, because in journal, the contribution per unit formula is selling price minus all variable cost. But when it comes to throughput accounting, then it is simply selling price minus only material cost. Once that part is done, then we calculate throughput contribution per hour. And if question requires us, we can go with throughput accounting ratio. Otherwise, with throughput contribution per hour, we can also do ranking. So information is given to us with respect to 4 products. We can see that here they have given us the bottleneck process hours, production rate per machine hour. So if 1 machine hour of this bottleneck process is given to W, then 200 units are produced. Similarly for X, it's 500 units. For Y, it's 400 units. And for Z, it's 350 units. Next, we have the selling price data, material cost per unit data, and conversion cost. If a company is not able to increase the availability of machine C, it means that if we cannot increase the bottleneck hours, then what is the production ranking of product Y? So they are asking only for product Y, and options are, should it be first, second, third, or fourth? So let's first do the calculation, and based upon that, we'll try to assess that what should be the ranking of product Y. So as discussed, we'll be doing this question on Excel. First of all, let's write the products. So we have 4 products, W, X, Y, and Z. Now, because we need to calculate the throughput contribution per unit, so let's write their selling prices. Selling price for W, 350. Then we have 190, 270, and for Z it is 215. Because we need to calculate throughput contribution per unit, therefore, specifically, students should not be doing mistakes here, taking into account the conversion cost also. While calculating throughput contribution, we only take the material cost. So subtract the material cost, what we have 120 for W. For X, it is 95. For Y, it is 160. For Z, it is 75. Let's subtract the material cost and we will arrive at throughput contribution. So here we can add the two numbers by simply selecting the cells and showing the adding sign. Once you are done with it, then you can drag it for all the remaining cells and it will automatically give you the sum answer. So we got the throughput contribution per unit, but the decision for the product ranking, it depends upon throughput contribution per bottleneck hour. So let's calculate it. Throughput contribution per hour. Now here if you look at the data, it says that in 1 hour, 200 units of W are produced. Therefore, we will multiply the contribution per unit of 230 with the number of units that can be produced in 1 hour. So multiply by 200. Similarly, 95 multiply by 500, 400, and similarly we'll get, after multiplying with 350, we will get the throughput contribution per hour for product C as 49,000. Now this information is sufficient enough to do the ranking, and because the question specifically doesn't ask us to calculate throughput accounting ratio, therefore the remaining two steps are not needed. So let's do the ranking. Now the product that has the highest contribution per hour, we should be selecting it first. So look at the throughput contributions per hour, and obviously the first ranking should be given to product C and second ranking should be given to product X, then product W, and finally the fourth ranking we should give to product Y. So because in this question they're asking about product Y, so the right answer for this question should be D, where the ranking of the product is 4. So this is how this style of question should be tested. Again, you can do this question on calculator, and if you are more comfortable doing it on Excel, so you already have the opportunity in exam to navigate and move across the questions. You can come to the constructed response workspace given to you and do this question there, get the answer and select the right option. Let's come to example number 4. This is a kind of one-off question which tests the basics of costing, and as such, concept is not required to answer this question. Only we need to be careful while dealing with the numbers that are given in this question. So read it very carefully and use your common sense to answer this question. The cost of running a company's IT department is $2.4 million per year. So that's important that this cost is given to us is annually. 90% of the processing time in the department is spent on recording accounting transactions and 10% on recording online information requests from managers. It means that out of 2.4 million, 90% is more specific to the IT department cost relating to recording transactions, and only 10% of the cost is for information requests from managers. Now there are two types of requests. So now they're talking about the second part where we have the total allocated cost 10%, full reports and specific queries. A full report takes twice the processing time as a specific query, and each month there are 4,000 specific queries and 500 requests for full reports. Costs are apportioned on the basis of processing time. What is the estimated cost per specific query? So in this question, you can see that $2.4 million is our total cost. 90% of the cost is for accounting transaction, for which they are not asking us in the requirement, so that's ignored. Only 10% is for information request, and because specific inquiry actually falls within the information request, so we will be taking only 10% of the cost. Then they are saying that out of the total requests that we have, full reports and specific queries we have, and the full report takes twice the processing time as specific query. So if you have 4,000 specific queries and 500 requests for full reports, then obviously the full reports are taking twice as time as the specific queries. So we have to multiply by 2 to get the total number of requests, and then we can calculate the cost per specific query. If we identify what type of topic is tested for this particular question, so I would say that although they have tested the information and management system section, but it is a general costing question which tests your mathematical computations while calculating cost for any specific unit, or like in this question, this is cost per specific query. So let's do this question. So first of all, because we need to calculate cost per specific query, and specific query falls under the information request from managers. Therefore, first of all, calculate the total cost that relates to information requests of manager, which is total cost for information requests is equal to 2.4 million times, because the allocated time is only 10%, so multiply by 10%. This gives you 240,000. And now calculate the total number of requests. When it comes to total number of requests, we have two types of it. The specific requests are given 4,000, but the other requests that we have, which are for full reports, these are only 500, as it takes twice as time as the specific queries. Therefore, we should be multiplying by 2. And the reason we are calculating total number of requests is that this $240,000 cost is incurred for all of these requests. Therefore, we have to convert it into the total number of requests. Now, important point here is that these requests are for 1 month, whereas the given cost is annual cost. Therefore, we have to convert these requests into annual requests. So this is monthly request. Let's multiply this with 12 and we'll get the total number of annual requests. Now it's just a division step to get the right answer. So cost per specific query will be equal to the total number of costs, total amount of cost related to information requests divided by the total number of requests, and this gives you $4 per specific query, and the right answer for this question should be A. So you can see how we attempted and tackled section A questions. It's a short scenario question. We first need to read the question, identify the topic, try to recall the steps, the formulas that we have in that particular topic, then read the full question, read the requirement, try to identify, try to assess what's required in the question, read the options, follow the relatability rule, which option seems to be more relatable to the question, then select the option. Now next, let's have a look at section B. What is tested in section B? So from exam syllabus areas perspective, any topic can be tested in section B, but I would emphasize specifically on one syllabus area, one topic, that is costing techniques, because this is a kind of a topic that's not tested in section C. So there is high probability that the examiner would test it as one case study question in section B. So when you are preparing costing techniques, prepare it from objective style questions perspective, and the long section C style questions will not be tested from this particular chapter. Some other topics that are also important for section B, it might be variances or standard costing. The reason being, variance is very integral part of performance management, and sometimes the examiner tests this particular topic in section C, and if they don't test it in section C, then again there are high chances it will be tested in the section B of the exam. Similarly, decision making techniques, a very integral part of performance management. A lot of weight is there, and during our tuition and preparation phase, we also spend a lot of time as there are different chapters in it. Now again, if decision making technique the examiner doesn't test in section C, so again high probability is there that they can pick any topic like CVP analysis or maybe risk uncertainty, and they will test this in section B of the exam. So from syllabus areas perspective, any syllabus area would be tested, but costing technique you need to focus more when it comes to preparation of section B of the exam. So now again, the same question we have, what to expect on exam day when it comes to section B questions. Would it include only numerical questions or theoretical questions, or it would be mix of both? So here expect a mix of both styles of questions to be tested when it comes to section B of the exam. Let's say if the examiner tests variances in section B, case study questions. Now, when it comes to variance, students usually feel it's a numerical question, and they might expect that all of the 5 questions that we have in section B would purely numerical and calculation based. But it won't be the same case in exam. Let's suppose if they are testing that topic, then maybe 2-3 questions would include numerical calculations, like they might ask you to calculate market size variance, market share variance, but maybe the remaining 2 or 3 questions that would be theoretical, they might ask you that why we are calculating planning and operational variances, and they might give you a brief scenario and ask you that in this particular scenario, how to assess the performance of the manager and what are the key indicators while assessing it. So when it comes to section B, just like section A, expect mix of both questions, and my advice is that focus on the theoretical question. For PM, the key to pass the exam is to focus on theoretical question, no matter whether it's section A, B, or C. So let's look at section P of PM exam, and I'll be taking a question from examiner report. It would be a case study question where a scenario would be given to you, few paragraphs, maybe some cost or some financial data exhibit would be given, and followed by that there will be 5 objective test questions. So this is a section B case study question. Let's read it. And once we are reading the question scenario, our objective would be to identify the topic, recall all the important information points we would have covered during our preparation phase. And then once done, then we will look at the question requirements one by one and try to find out the right answer. So Midhus company manufactures air conditioning units and is considering an investment in a new unit that will be used in modern office buildings. Advances in technology mean that this unit is more sensitive to changes and variations in temperature, and therefore it can regulate airflow and heating more efficiently. Mid-hurst competitors currently do not have an equivalent product that can offer these features. So from the first paragraph of this question, we can analyze that the company is trying to produce a new product, and the features that the company wants to offer in this particular product, these features have not been offered by the competitors yet. So it's a kind of a differentiated product which the company intends to sell. The company further expects to sell 10,000 units over the predicted 5-year life cycle of the unit, and the finance director has just prepared the initial costing for the unit as follows. So when you look at the cost card, it gives you almost all kinds of costs that would be incurred over the product life cycle, whether it's production or non-production. And after that, the finance director plans to use life cycle costing to measure the profitability of the new product. So this statement gives us an idea that the examiner has tested life cycle costing for this part of the exam. And we need to recall very important points that we would have covered during our preparation phase regarding the life cycle costing. The chief executive has asked for more information about life cycle costing as he is not sure whether it is the right method to use. Production director has reviewed the costings in detail and suggested a couple of changes. He is enthusiastic about the product and believes that modifications could be made to prolong the product's life cycle, but wonders when the best time would be to make changes to the product. So in the last paragraph, a very important advantage or benefit of life cycle costing that's been highlighted, and that is somehow we can identify a particular point during the stage of the product life cycle where we can do some investment and modifications, and those modifications can help the business to extend the life cycle of the product. Now, extending the life cycle of product means that you would be able to sell more units, and hence it increases the profitability from that particular product as well as the overall company. So it gives you an idea. Maybe they're going to test this particular point later in the questions, asking you what should be the suitable stage at which modifications should be made. So that's a short scenario. Usually section B questions have such sort of scenario where multiple paragraphs are given along with any calculation. If there is any calculation, they give you a cost card or some sort of financial information as well. Now let's quickly look at the objective test questions that have been asked from this particular case study. Question number 1 is theoretical, and requirement of the question is, according to the life cycle costing method, which two of the following statements regarding the stages of the life cycle are true? So we'll be reading all these 4 options and we need to find out which 2 options are correct. First of all, you need to emphasize on the word two. It means I have to select 2 statements. Secondly, sometimes when we read such sort of questions, when we're reading a particular statement, we might not be clear about whether it is true or false. So I would advise you to move on to the next option. And maybe once you read all the 4 options, you can identify which 2 seems to be the most correct one, and then go by that 2 statements or the 1 statement, whatever the requirement would be. So sometimes when we read a particular statement, a particular option, we are confused. Maybe it's true or false. I would advise you move on, read all the 4 options, and then it would be very easy for you to pick 2 of the two correct options from the given one. So here, the first option that we have is, at the introduction stage, further capital expenditure will be needed as production capacity will need to increase to meet demand. Now, this is quite straightforward statement, and it simply says that if you want to sell more units, you need to invest in the production capacity of the business. And at introduction stage, obviously you have not touched your maximum. So there is a lot of room to produce more units. And if you want to produce more units, you need investment in your assets and production capacity to meet that demand. So this statement is straightforward and hence it is true. Option B, the maturity stage occurs when the market has reached saturation point and bought enough of the product. Now, maybe if a student reads this statement, he might think that this statement could be true, or he might have a doubt that this could be false also. So, thinking from a student's perspective, I would not comment on this particular statement and move on because I have a doubt maybe it's true or maybe it would be false. So, let's read option C. The majority of the product's life cycle costs are determined by decisions which are made at the design and development stage. This statement is again quite straightforward and we know it is true. You might have studied this point in life cycle costing that whenever a company develops a new product, then almost 80 to 85% of the product life cycle costs, these are committed at the design stage. So when you develop any new product, you have to look at its design. You have to look at the features which you're going to offer to customers. And all of these decisions are actually done at the design and development stage of the product lifecycle. Hence, it's a very crucial stage, and a lot of companies spend a lot of time in identifying how this stage could be made more and more cost effective. Because later, once the product has been launched, you cannot do modifications or amendments to its features. Hence, majority of the cost of the product lifecycle that's been committed at design and development stage, and this statement is true. Now, we didn't comment on B, but now we know that A and C seems to be the correct one. So let's read the last one also. The growth stage, when sales will have reached their peak, it becomes stable, will be the most profitable stage. So the growth stage is the stage they are saying when sales have reached their peak. No, it's not the stage where sales have reached the peak. Growth means that still you can sell more units. So how it could be the peak stage of the product life cycle? This is a quite again straightforward statement which cannot be true. So if I'm saying that A and C are correct, then obviously B should be wrong. And yes, it is, because the saturation point means that now the sales will decrease in the future, and that suits more to decline stage characteristic. Therefore, for this particular question, the right options are A and C. So this is how you navigate such sort of true and false question where maybe you are confused with particular option, but I would advise you that read all the options and then comment on each of it, that which one seems to be the best one out of all, that is the correct option. Question number 2, it's highly likely that when life cycle costing will be tested in exam, the examiner would also test how to calculate life cycle cost per unit. And here we have such a question where they're saying that what is the life cycle cost of this new air conditioning unit per unit. So it should be rounded to the nearest dollar. For that, we have to go back to the cost card. Again, an advice: whenever you are solving a numerical question, first try to recall what formula, what method is needed to get the right answer. So if I want to calculate life cycle cost per unit, probably we know that all kinds of costs that are incurred over the life cycle of the product should be added in the calculation, no matter it is production cost, no matter it is non-production cost, no matter it is upfront R&D cost or downstream withdrawal cost. So all kinds of costs we're going to add in total, and then it should be divided by the total number of units. So if you are solving such a question, you should be solving such a question on the calculator. So you can simply add it. But just for your understanding, I'll be doing it on Excel, showing you which costs I'm taking and how I'm calculating the cost per unit. So let's calculate all the costs in total which are relevant to the product throughout the life cycle. So first of all, we have R&D cost. Write the question number. This is question number 2. And the first cost that we have is R&D. Let's quickly write it. Total cost is 6,200, and be very careful with it that the given cost are with 1,000 common. So we have to add back 3 zeros once we are done with the total. Next, we have design cost. Design cost 33,450. Marketing cost, a very important cost for the initial product. How we can market it, how we can increase the demand, how we can make the customer aware that we are also selling this product. For all this, these types of needs, we need to spend marketing cost. Variable production cost. Now, variable production cost should be dealt with care, that this cost is given to us in per unit, but we're gonna multiply by the number of units to calculate the cost in total, as we first will calculate the total life cycle cost, and then we can divide by the number of units. Fixed production cost, 98,470. Then we have variable distribution cost. This cost is also given to us in per unit. So let's multiply by the number of sales units, because budget, production and sale units are same. So we'll be multiplying by the same 10,000. Then fixed distribution cost. This is 10,300. We have variable selling cost, which is $4 times 10,000. And then we have fixed selling cost, 7,790. And finally, the last cost is the admin cost. So even if the admin cost is related to that product, we should be adding it in the calculation of life cycle cost per unit. Now I have written all the costs, so I'll take the total of it, total life cycle costs. And whenever you are taking total on Excel, always use the sum function. Let's select all the cells. Now this gives us 907,345. We know that we have taken 3 zeros common. So let's add it back. So we can here mention that this is with 3 zeros common. So now it should be 907, 345 and 3 zeros. Once done, now you need cost per unit. So divide it by the number of units. We already read in the question, these are 10,000 units which the company intends to sell across its life cycle. And here we can round it to nearest dollar. I don't want any decimal places, so we will reduce it to 0. So this gives you 90,735 life cycle cost per unit. Let's see we have this option or not. So we have this option 90,735. It means that the right answer for this question is D. So this is how life cycle cost per unit should be calculated. So let's look at the remaining 3 questions from the same case study. We have here question number 3. The production director has suggested the following change for the costing of the new product. Currently, material costs are 20% of the variable production costs per unit. One of the materials used is stainless steel, which is budgeted at $2,000 per unit, but an alternative corrosion-resistant metal costing 25% less can be used. The production director believes a 15% discount can be negotiated for the remainder of the materials. What would be the revised material cost per unit to the nearest dollar? This is what we need to calculate. Now, looking at this particular question and its given scenario, I don't think so any principle that we might have studied in life cycle costing or even the whole PM syllabus that would be applicable here to get the answer. It is simply a general math question where different percentages are given to us which we need to adjust in the calculation of the cost. So if you are good in basic maths, at times using that knowledge you can still get the right answer for few of the questions in the exam. So let's solve this question. We need to read it very carefully to adjust all the percentages that are given in the question and then get the right answer. So they are saying that first line is important, that they are saying material cost is 20% of the variable production cost. Now, first of all, I need to look at the variable production cost. So the variable production cost per unit is given to us $42,000. So let's take that cost. So variable production cost, that is $42,000, and this is in per unit, and our requirement is also same per unit. Now they are saying that from this variable production cost 20% is material cost. So what should be the material cost? Now when you multiply 42,000 with 20%, you will get $8,400. So $8,400 is only material cost. And how we got this material cost? We have taken the 42,000 and multiplied by 20%. Now from this material cost, which is 8,400, they are further saying that it should be divided into two types of material. One type of material, they are saying that we can, so one type of material they are saying that the cost of which is $2,000 per unit. This one we can buy 25% less than its given cost. So $2,000 we have here, and we can buy it 25% less. So 1 minus 25%, we will subtract 25% from it. And if you do this calculation, you will get $1,500. Now what's the remaining material that's left? Because our total material cost was 8,400 and 2,000 standard cost, for which we already did the calculation. So the remaining material that's left is $6,400. And for this 6,400, they are saying that we can negotiate and we'll get a discount of 15%. So this should be reduced by 15%. Again, we are doing it in the same way, taking $6,400 cost and multiplying it with 1 minus 15%, which gives us 5,440. So for the remainder, the cost is 5,440. And for the earlier material, we already did the calculation of it, a specific type of it where we can buy the material at 25% lower than the given price, that is 1500. So the revised material cost per unit should be 1500 plus 5440, and this will give you a total of 6940. And because it's a blank question, so you need to put this number into the answer. So 6940 should be the right answer for this question. You can see that first of all, from the given production cost, we got the material share. Then we divided the material into two categories, because here the discount part is 25%, here discount part is 15%. We just adjusted those percentages. In the end, we added to get the revised material cost, which is 6940. Question number 4. The production director has also asked about the implications of production planning if the company wishes to extend the product's life cycle. At what stage of the life cycle is the new unit most likely to undergo product development? So this is again a very straightforward question. Let's read the question scenario and requirement again, and then we will look at the stages to look at the options to find out the right stage. The production department director has also asked about the implications for production planning if the company wishes to extend the product's life cycle. So they want to extend the product life cycle, and this point we earlier discussed in the scenario where the production director was keen to extend the life cycle of the product and he was not sure what should be the right stage. Now, same question they're asking. So the right stage should be the maturity stage. Reason being, at this stage, you cannot increase your sales. This is the stage where we have touched our maximum. And if you want to further increase your sale with the current product features, you cannot. So some sort of investment, some sort of modification in the product is required that can come up with some alternative features, and hence we can extend the life cycle of the product. So option C is correct for this example. Last question. The chief executive wants to be briefed on the advantages of life cycle costing. Which of the following statements regarding advantages of life cycle costing are correct? So straight question about advantages. Statement number 1, it draws management's attention to all costs related to a product which other costing methods usually treat as period cost. True. This particular statement you can relate it with the calculation that we did earlier for question 2, where you can see that we have taken both the period costs and product cost. So when it comes to life cycle costing, all kinds of costs are taken into consideration, no matter whether it's a product cost or period cost. So this statement is true and it's a benefit of it. 2, it focuses on measuring a product's costs from the concept to withdrawal rather than reviewing cost on a period by period basis. Instead of that, you would have looked at the cost of a product from year by year. What we do in life cycle costing, we start from the design stage, from the concept stage of the product life cycle, and till its product withdrawal, all kinds of costs that are incurred across its life cycle we take into account, and then we do the calculation of it. So that's again an explanation of life cycle costing, and hence it's true. Number 3, it focuses on what consumers are prepared to pay for a product and establishes cost budgets based on an expected selling price. Now, when you read this statement, somehow it gives you an impression of target costing, because in target costing, you first of all try to find out what should be the suggested price at which the customer would be ready to buy your product. So this statement favors more target costing instead of life cycle costing, hence we won't include it in our final option. It aids understanding of the relationship between decisions at the design stage and the cost of other functions such as marketing. So this statement is also relatively straightforward and true for life cycle costing. as you're taking into account the design stage and its relation with some other costs like marketing or admin across the life cycle of the product. So the right answer for question 5 should be the statements 1, 2, and 4. And this option is B. So this actually was the case study which we did. And in case study style questions, the important point is that once you read the question, identify the topic, and then try to answer the questions individually, but your frame of mind, in that frame of mind, you should be recalling all the concepts, all the information point, and all the formulas or methods that are there in that particular topic, because then it would help you to narrow down your options and select the right one from the given options. Section C of the exam, a very important section of the exam, and I would say it's a kind of a section that if you perform well in exam, there are high chances you'll pass the exam. So when it comes to section C, we need to know which syllabus areas will be tested. So specifically when it comes to section C, examiner has mentioned that one of the question out of the two will be from the performance measurement and control. This makes performance measurement and control a very important syllabus area of performance management exam. You will be having a 20-mark question in exam, and here we have 4 to 5 different topics like balance scorecard, assessing the performance of the business using financial and non-financial indicators, the KPIs. Then we have the building block model, and for divisional performance assessment, return on investment, residual income, ways to assess the performance, and finally, the most student perceive it as a very difficult topic. That's the transfer pricing. So 4 to 5 different topics we have. Examiner can pick any one of the topic, and they will ask you a 20-mark question. But when it comes to performance measurement and control, at times the 20-mark question is purely theoretical, discursive based question. And here, the only way to score well in this particular question is to practice more and more. Balance scorecard question, if it comes in exam, and previously maybe you have prepared yourself by looking at the question and then from the back you're reading the answer. Now that will not work. You have to come up with the specific reasoning. Those general reasoning will not work. So my advice is that whenever you are doing any balance scorecard question or a KPI question, or let's say building block question, read the question and try to jot down the answer. Try to write down the answer. Don't read the answer from the back. If you're reading the answer from the back, that confidence will never be there in the exam to attempt or tackle such a question. So a very important section, performance measurement and control, and prepare always yourself performance measurement and control topic that it would be tested in section C. What else could be tested in section 3C? The second question can be again any syllabus area except costing, but it could be a variance question. If you get a variance question in exam, then you should pass the exam, because variances are straightforward. You have 10, 12 marks numerical calculation followed by some analysis on it, which is also quite straightforward. Though you can have a budgeting question also. Now, if you get a, let's suppose, performance measurement balance scorecard question with a budgeting, like a rolling budget question, or maybe an incremental budgeting, then it would be the case where out of the 40 marks, now almost 25 to 30 marks would be theoretical. So it can be that sort of testing could also be there in the exam, where the section C is more inclined towards the theoretical question, towards those discursive elements. So be prepare yourself that such questions could be tested in the exam. Apart from budgeting, any topic from decision making could be tested. Recently, examiner tested CVP analysis. It's a kind of a topic often gets tested in the exam when it comes to section C. So do focus on the remaining topics of the decision making. So let's look at section C of the PM exam. We know that when it comes to section C, we have two constructed response questions, each worth 20 marks. And it's a very important section of the exam. If you really want to pass this exam, you need to score well in this section. And the key to score well in this section is actually to practice more and more questions for the topics which we earlier identified in our video that are important for this particular section. Let's quickly look at the question that we will be doing for this 20 marker. So the topic that I have selected here is variances because I believe it's a very integral part of PM exam. And if this question, variance question, comes in exam in section C, student can get very easy marks and it helps them to actually pass the exam. So it's a question on the material mix and yield variance. Along with that, they have also asked us to calculate material usage variance. So first of all, I'll be calculating material mix variance, then yield, and then just copy pasting few calculations, we can get the usage variance. So that's the reason we are doing it in the end. So let's quickly read the question scenario. Kappa Company produces omega, an animal feed made by mixing and heating three ingredients, alpha, beta, and gamma. The company uses a standard costing system to monitor its costs. And three types of input are given to us, alpha, beta, and gamma. And such type of multiple materials would always be there in material mix and yield question, because we need to find out whether the company has used the material in the same standard mix as allowed or they have changed the mix. That's why we'll be having the mix variance. So their quantities for 100 kg are given for each of the material. Standard cost per kgs are given also. The next notes are for part B, so let's leave it for the time being. In the end, we have last month 4,600 kg of omega was produced using the following inputs. So the actual data for all those three materials along with their costs are given. As it's a numerical question, so I'll be doing it on the spreadsheet, specimen constructed response workspace sheet that's given to us by the ACCA as a kind of a platform to practice the numerical question. So it's a section C question, and we are doing it first of all for requirement A2, which is material mix variance. Now, when it comes to material mix and yield variances, the calculation is very systematic. Step by step, you need to understand what we are doing and then reproduce the same steps in the exam question. You do 10 questions on variances, the steps remain same, the method remains same, the systematic approach remains same, and every time you'll get the answer. So it's just about learning those steps, learning those methods to get the answer. So first of all, we will open a column where we'll write all the materials that are given in the question. We know there are three: alpha, beta, and gamma. The second column will be for the standard. We need standard quantity for 1 unit or for the given kg, that is 100 kg for this particular question. So standard kgs are required as per the cost card. So for alpha, it is 40 kgs, then 60, and then 20 for gamma. Let's take a total of it. Now we'll write the formula of it. So the material mix formula is actually the actual quantity in the standard mix compared with actual quantity in the actual mix. We take the difference of it. and then we always multiply by the standard rate to get the variance. So this is a systematic approach. Once you have written all the materials and their standard required to make 1 unit, directly come to the actual quantity, actual mix, and this would always be given to in the question. These are the actual quantities used by the business, which are for alpha 2200 kg, for beta 2500 kg, for gamma it is 920. The next step is to take the sum of this column. So let's take the sum of it using the sum function. So we got 5620 kgs. It means that actually we used 5620 kgs of all these materials to produce 4600 kg of omega. Now because the first column is also actual quantity, so you can put the total same. And now the difference between this column and the next one is only the mix, as we are looking to calculate the material mix variance only. So just take the standard proportions and multiply by the actual quantity. The standard proportion for alpha would be 40 divided by 120, and then the actual quantity will be 5620. This gives you 1873.333. Similarly, we'll do it for beta. Take the standard proportion 60 over 120, which gives you 50%, and then multiply this with the actual quantity. And lastly, for gamma, we will do it in the same way. So this gives you actual quantity in the standard mix. This is actual quantity in actual mix. Let's take a difference. And this gives you the difference in the quantities. This should be multiplied by the standard rate, not actual. So the standard rate is $2 per kg for alpha, $5 per kg for beta, and $1 per kg for gamma. Let's multiply the rate with the quantity to get the variance. And then in the end, we can take a total of it. Now, as per this formula, any variance that comes in negative is adverse. So this is adverse variance, this is favorable variance, this is also favorable variance, and the total is also favorable. So a very easy way to calculate material mix variance. Whenever in exam you get a question on material mix variance, follow these steps and you'll always get the right answer. Now we will copy this because we want to calculate material yield variance, and some of the figures we can use from this calculation. So let's copy it. Let's paste it here. Now this would become your material yield variance. This is requirement A1, sorry, A3. Material yield variance formula, we'll write it. The formula for material yield variance is standard quantity in standard mix and actual quantity in standard mix. Difference multiply by standard rate gives you variance. So actual quantity in standard mix we already calculated. You can see in the above calculation we did the calculation of actual quantity standard mix. Just select this cell and then we can simply copy it for the remaining cells. This gives you 5620 actual quantity standard mix. How to calculate standard quantity standard mix? It simply means standard quantity for actual production. If you want to make 100 kgs, then you need 40 kg of alpha. You actually produced 4600 kgs. Now because this quantity is not for 1 kg, this is for 100 kg, so in the end we multiply by 100. This gives you 1840. Similarly, 60 kgs are for 100 kg, so divide it, multiply by the actual production 4600. And lastly, 20 kgs are needed for 100 kg of the product, multiply by the actual production. So every time what we are doing is taking the standard quantity and multiplying with the actual production, because this standard quantity is not for 1 unit, it is for 100 kgs. Therefore, I divided by 100 and then multiplied by the actual production. Take the sum of this. This gives you 5520. Difference we already have. Rates are there. You already got the answer for the variance. This is adverse. This is also adverse. This is also adverse, and the total is adverse. So all of these are adverse. So you can see that when it comes to yield variance, we just need to find out standard quantity, standard mix. Apart from that, if you copy and paste, you will directly get your answer for yield. Now the last requirement is left. Again, I'll copy this format and we'll calculate material usage variance. So material usage formula is standard quantity in standard mix compared with actual quantity in actual mix. And both of these figures we already calculated. Standard quantity in standard mix, we have it. Just take the actual quantity in actual mix from the mix variance. And you just need to copy these cells. Automatically, you will get the answer. And you can see this is adverse, this is favorable, this is 0, neither favorable nor adverse, and this will also be favorable. So usage variance is the sum of mix and yield, and if you add mix and yield, you should also be getting the same answer. But as in the question, the examiner specifically highlighted that we have to calculate for each ingredient. Therefore, for each ingredient, we have to do this calculation. So a pretty straightforward calculation when it comes to variances. You just need to know the systematic approach, the steps. Every time you follow the steps, you will get the answer. In the end, my final tips for the students, and the first point is very important here: the attitude and the confidence you carry while entering the exam. Let's say if a student, while entering the exam, starts to think that because he has not done sufficient level of practice and he has also not covered all the syllabus areas, so he might be thinking while entering the exam hall that I might fail this particular exam. So the outcome of this attitude is that you would fail it. It's all about the attitude. It's all about what you believe. If your attitude is negative, if you are entering the exam hall with low confidence and you don't believe in yourself, then probably whatever you do in those 3 hours, the outcome cannot be good. The outcome cannot be pass. So the first thing we need to correct ourselves is to build that confidence in ourselves, is to believe in ourselves, is to have that positive attitude, no matter what level of preparation I have put in the past few weeks or past few days. Doesn't matter if I have done whole of the revision kit or not. Now, once I'm entering the exam hall, my objective is to ace this exam. My objective is to pass this exam. Believe in yourself, have that confidence, build that confidence in yourself that I have all those capabilities to pass this exam. If others are passing, why not I? So always enter your exam hall with the level of confidence, with a positive attitude, and believing in yourself that you can ace this exam, no matter, regardless of what level of preparation you have put in the past few days. Another important point is knowing the basic. Whatever the exam you are preparing for yourself, you need to look into the basics of that subject, and those basics and ground level knowledge is key to pass the exam. My final advice is for the repeaters, because whenever students fail the exam and they come for the resit classes, I always ask a question from them, what new you're doing this time? And their answer always amazed me. So the students usually answer that last time I did revision kit one time, I think that my practice was not sufficient. So this time I'm trying to do the kit 2 or 3 times before going into exam. Now look, you are doing the same mistake which you did in the past sitting, and the result will not be different. Our efforts result in an outcome. And if our efforts would remain same, our outcome would also remain same. So you need to think what different I should be doing in this particular sitting that would change my outcome. If you go with the same mindset, if you go with the same level of preparation, if you keep on doing same things which you did in the past sitting, then don't expect a different result. Result will also be same. If you want to pass this time, you need to think, you need to analyze what kind of mistakes you have done in the past. And then you need to work on that. You need to come up with a different strategy. You cannot do all those questions again or maybe 2 or 3 times to pass the exam. It's not about doing those questions again and again. It's about thinking where I'm lacking. It's about thinking where I'm struggling and coming up with effective strategy to deal that. If you do it, probably your outcome would be different. So to all the students who are giving PM exam, best of luck from my side. Hope you pass the exam. So my final tips to tackle the PM exam and ace this particular exam with flying marks. First of all, few specific exam level tips for the performance management paper, and it could be applicable to other ACC exams as well. One of the most frequently asked questions from students is which section of the exam should be attempted first? And my answer to all of those students is very straightforward, that it doesn't matter which section you start first. The main point is, if you look at the 3 hours exam, the first hour is very important and crucial to pass the exam. This is half an hour, 1 hour, where we need to just calm down, we just need to settle down and get into that exam environment. And we cannot afford exam pressure at all in the first half an hour or 1 hour. If you do it, then probably your chances of passing the exam, that would be very less. So the first half an hour, 1 hour is to gain and grab the confidence. Now, how you would achieve it? The only way is that you do those questions for which you know the answer and you are 100% sure about it. So let's start with section A, but don't complete section A. Don't do all of its questions. Just read the question, read the option. If you know the answer, you're 100% sure about it, do it, select the right option and move on. Any question where you are struggling, any question where you are finding difficulty, where you need to recall, where you need to waste and spend your time, just flag it and move on. I would advise that complete section A. Maybe you could have only attempted 5 questions from it, but you know that those 5 questions you got 10 marks. And you would have hardly spent maybe 15 to 20 minutes to complete it, because you have not wasted time on those difficult questions. Move on to section B. Again, we have 15 objective test questions. Do it in the same way. The questions, you know the answer with certainty. You know the method to solve it. Do it, get the right answer. But the questions where you are struggling, where you need to spend time, just flag it and move on. Let's say you have again done it in the same manner as you have done the section A. You got 5 questions and 5 questions means that another 10 marks have been added. So now you got 20 marks, and you might have spent maybe 30 to 40 minutes at max. Move to section C, and now your confidence level will be a bit higher because you know that I already got 20 marks from that 50 marks benchmark, so I just need 30. Give an appropriate time to section C because it's a kind of a section that needs time, where the student needs to settle down, need to be calm to answer the question. Your mind should be relaxed to read that scenario, to analyze it critically, to write the answer. And let's say you spend 1 hour minimum to maximum 1 hour, 20, 25 minutes over there, giving 40, 45 minutes time to each of those two questions, attempted it well. And by the end of your section C, let's assume that out of those 40 marks, you think that you could score, or you would have made 20 marks out of it. So that is still sufficient for us. So 20 plus 20 gives you 40. Now it's the last 1 hour or maybe 40, 45 minutes left with us. We have 20 questions, 10 from section A, 10 from section B. And out of 20, I need only 5 to pass the exam. So that confidence level would be very high. And when it's the last hour of your exam, the brain works more faster. And maybe some of the concepts which you were recalling, trying to recall earlier, and you were unable to get it from your memory, you can easily now recall it. And those 5 questions, once you are done with it, you know that I've got that 50 mark. Now you can look for those difficult questions, difficult tricks which are set by the examiner for you to actually waste the time. But you have actually just simply moved on, and you have not wasted your time with those difficult questions. So very important is the exam strategy. And if you go by this strategy, that I need to minimum get that 50 marks first, I need to secure myself, and I will not be fighting with the examiner with those difficult tricks, with those difficult points, then passing exam is very easy. Second tip is know your strengths. If you know that I'm good in costing, if you know that I'm good in variances, and such a question comes in exam, then you must have to do it diligently and get maximum score out of it. Then you cannot say that, oh, I have done, let's say, 15, 20 question on variances, but the exam question was completely different. It cannot be completely different. It's going to test the same concept which you have studied, throughout your preparation phase. So know your strengths, play with it. Theory is important. You cannot ignore it. Without focusing on theoretical topics, it is impossible to pass PM exam. This paper is not about numbers where you can do some number crunching and you'll pass the exam. You need to focus on discursive parts. You need to focus on theoretical portions of the exam. The next tip, focus on easy marks. Why students fail in exam? It's not because the examiner has tested a very difficult question. It's just because they have neglected, they have overlooked those easy marks which were there in every section of the exam. Every section of the exam contains easy marks. If one question is very difficult, then the other one would be easy, so the student can focus on that and pass the exam. So you never fail because of the difficulty of the exam. You fail because of focusing on that difficult parts, wasting time there, and somewhere else where the marks were easy, you did not focus, you did not get those easy marks, and you failed the exam. Finally, an important tip, have that courage in yourself, build that courage in yourself to answer discursive elements of the exam. If balance scorecard question comes in exam, transfer pricing question comes in exam, or KPI question comes in exam, now that 20 mark question, if you simply skip it, then getting 50 out of 80, that would be very hard. So my advice is that build the courage. It's all about courage and time management. if you have given appropriate time to those discursive elements of the exam, and you have that courage that let's write something, let's do something with this particular question, let's think about it. Once you start it, once you initiate, then you will find that with the passage of time you will be able to write at least some of the points to get a pass grade in that question as well. Finally, own figure rules, OFR, all of you know about it. It's a very important rule. Being ACCA student, you need to know about it, that whenever you are stuck in any particular question relating to section C of the exam, applicable in all skills module, and let's suppose it's a calculation sort of a question where there are 6 steps to get the final answer, and you know all of the steps except for step number 3, because step number 3 this time the examiner has twisted, and I don't know how to get the answer for step 3, but yes, I know for the rest of the steps how to approach it and how to navigate to get the final answer. So when it comes to step number 3, do not waste your time. Wasting time simply means that your chances of passing the exam, that's going down. So you don't need to waste your time. Pick any figure, like an assumption figure, stated in the question that I have taken this figure as an assumption figure, and move on. What marker will do will not give you mark for that particular step, but based upon your wrong answer, for rest of the steps, it would be marked. And let's suppose it hardly contains 2 marks out of the total 10 marks, then you have lost 20% of the marks of that question, but 80% you still got it. But let's assume that student tries to attempt that particular step, tries to recall it, and he spends 10 minutes to write the answer for that step number 3. Maybe his answer would be correct, but spending 10 minutes on 2 marks means that somewhere else you have lost maybe 5 marks. So cost benefit analysis, the cost of that particular step, that's too much than the benefit you would get from it, and therefore my advice is that just move on, have that courage to move on. So these are some basic exam level tips specific to PM exam, could be applicable on other exams, which a student should implement to pass the exam. Because doing practice question more and more, studying for a longer hours, this is not sufficient enough to pass ACCA exams. ACCA exam is more about technique. ACCA exam is more about time management. ACCA exam is more about being self-disciplined. And all these important points you need to take into account while attempting the exam, and that's the only key to pass the exam in the first attempt.